Tactical FPS games, such as Valorant or CS, share the same concept of preparation, usually refers to the player's ability to read the game.
Walking around and just walking in a stacked wonderland!
That's why things such as crucial placement and positioning can be seen as absolute fundamentals, as they serve as a way of showcasing that the player understands what is about to happen and knows how to prepare himself. While these are important, many players plateau after grasping them. Even pro players sometimes autopilot their fundamentals. To a point, they tend to neglect crucial details such as angle tracing. While good preparation offers an advantage, we can't neglect the need of aiming, even in the case of our initial preparation being successful, as even the perfect read still requires some degree of aiming skill. So what if we have a good read and cursor placement, but our click timing skills are poor and we tense up during the clicking process, ending up clicking away from a target? That's why developing a higher degree of control and stability during the click timing process, even on simple moving targets, can be extremely useful in context of FPS games. This is why a lot of players have found a good value from grinding linear dynamic clicking tasks in aim trainers. This type of scenarios usually present you with semi-predictable bot movement patterns that are easy to read, which means that you can make your cursor stable while timing the click accordingly, which is very similar to situations in game when your cursor placement is on the right spot and someone peeks into you and you have to click time. If you want to learn more about this specific category of aiming and why it's useful for tech FPS games in a more deep manner, I highly encourage you to take a look at Matty's video about it, because he goes very deeply into this topic, explaining why it's super useful for tech FPS games. However, while linear clicking is good when we can easily read and predict the target, what if our initial reading fails? Obviously, we risk the enemy player to either stop before our crosshair, jump over it, or move bait us with some random strafe, causing our preparation to be interrupted, which means that we will have to aim at less predictable movement. This adds up a higher degree of aiming skills required to kill a target, such as frequent micro adjustments, click acquisitions, or even tracking.
I hate this kid.
Now, I'm pretty sure that you will know at least one person that struggles with hitting moving targets. Well, that person might even be you. There are certain reasons to why this is a common problem among so many players, even the top tier ones. In this video, we will delve into the concept of target reading skills in context of tech FPS games and describe the interplay of prediction, active reading, and proper aiming habits that are part of reading skills. What we mean by prediction here is guessing where our targets are going to be once they peek into us while queuing up our cursor placement or positioning accordingly. Once said prediction fails, due to complexity of target movement pattern, we should be able to switch into active reading skills, which in this case refers to actively observing the movement of the target in the present moment and making constant adjustment in real time. Due to the predictive nature of the game, players that exclusively develop their mechanical skill by playing their game have a much higher tendency to rely on patterns and prediction, even during situations in which movement of the enemy player is really uncertain. A good example of that could be Kyosuke, a professional CS player that recently gets more and more recognition for his skills. In his gameplay, we can notice how good he is at connecting his first shots, based on his initial visualization, which can be seen as some sort of a game sense, based on the prediction he has built by grinding the game. However, what happens when this initial prediction fails and the enemy player decides to move more evasively? Let's take a look at one of his clips when he faces Donk on Dust 2, in which we can clearly observe the prediction after the initial flick. When Donk started strafing in one direction, we can precisely see at which moment Kyosuke stopped continuing his aiming movement, assuming the strafe will end based on movement prediction, which costs him a duel. That's a good example of a situation in which we should be switching from our prediction into active reading skills. Donk's movement style easily exemplifies why predictions, while useful, can actually be harming us during the active aiming process.
To showcase it more intuitively, we can see how this prediction would look like in an aim trainer environment. We can observe the same type of prediction, which is polluting our efficiency and causing us to feel stiff with our micros. An ideal approach would be enforcing focus on actively reading the strafes and changes of direction of the target in order to ease in the ability to coordinate deliberate and efficient micro adjustments, essentially allowing us to confidently aim into the target's movement. What we mean by that is that we want to be dependent on our target reading. Even when knowing this fundamental, we may still face difficulties aiming on moving targets. This is due to the fact that we need to be versatile with our technique. For instance, having the ability to transition from reactive micros into ones containing more smoothness to allow for easier control, which helps reduce clutter when aiming on harder to read strafes. We can observe that both players are lacking a lot of stability, which comes from the inability to match their aiming speed to the target's velocity, as that will allow for increased stability on top of proper smoothness application and low tension habits. While in both clips, we visibly see issues with hitting a moving target, there is a difference in which approach we want to take when initiating our aiming process on these two patterns. Once we recognize that targets are moving in a more predictable yet evasive way, there's no point in going into reactive micros, as the really short and hard to read strafes will become harder to perceive with our eyes, which means that if our aiming intensity is too high, we risk ourselves to over adjust, and that's why our approach should shift into under aiming in order to properly speed match to the target's movement. On the other hand, if the target happens to get out of this AD spam into more active readable strafes, we want to have the ability to transition back into reactive micros.
To summarize, being able to fluidly switch between aiming techniques based on target reading skills is an important fundamental habit that we have to build. Developing a foundation will require learning how to commit to target movements rather than anticipating them to do specific things. So after missing a shot, especially while having pistol, instead of fully relying on prediction, by waiting for a target to get back into your crosshair, try to engage in an active aiming and reading process utilizing either reactive micros or underaiming habits, when you decrease the intensity of your movements to fit more controlled and smooth micros. And of course this would go hand in hand with your own movement, which is more complex and will require an entire video, so let me know if you would want to see a video about movement. So the active aiming habits we mentioned before can easily be trained in the game itself. In Counter-Strike we can think of doing pistol only DMs, while for Valorant we can maybe consider playing more DMs using Guardian. And aim trainers can easily accelerate the learning process by offering isolation with no filters. Developing a foundation for reading skills will require learning how to commit to target strafes fully rather than predicting their movement. This means that you will have to learn how to accurately speed match target strafing movements while maintaining good smoothness levels without micro jitters that might occur due to prediction. In case of training scenarios, we can think of multi-clicking tasks in which we aim at an evasively moving targets while having to hit them multiple times before they despawn, or some tracking scenarios. And yes, right now we might be like, oh, but I don't really track in FPS games. Yes, you're correct, but you do a lot of micro adjustments. In case of your crosshair placement being off, the guy picks you, you have to do a micro correction. And in case you miss this micro correction, you have to do another one. And these frequent micro corrections that you do in game after missing the shots are basically what you train on tracking tasks. On top of it, by playing these tasks, you will quickly grasp an idea of making your reading informed rather than rushed, which means that instead of spamming flicky movements over the targets, you will be able to identify what's going on quicker while applying more consistent aiming habits.